Kia ora, Merry Christmas. I hope you're having a lovely relaxed day. Yet again, Vintage Pearls Christmas Club time has rolled around, and it is my privilege to reveal all the contents to you today and to give you some background on the themes and to give you some ideas about what you can make with it. So if you've got a club, this hopefully will inform you, give you some inspiration about things you can do with it. If you didn't get a club and you just enjoy seeing what was in the box, this hopefully gives you a taste of what was there. So let's start with the first theme, which is on my new biodegradable Tramp sock yarn, and the theme was the Natural History Cabinet of Anna Blackburne. So what was in the box? Let's start there. The box looked something like this, and the first thing you probably noticed was the yarn filling it. So there were 2 skeins of Tramp sock yarn in the box, this blue tone and this very, very pale shell pink colour. And they were derived from the bird that is in the primary image that I used for this collection. Sort of the back colour of the bird and the underbelly of the bird were the 2 colours I was aiming for there. So in a little while I'll tell you what you can do with those, but let's see what else was in the box. So there was this little bundle of cards. As I say, on the front they have the primary image that I took inspiration from, and on the back they say that in this bag you'll find, and then there's a little slot to fill in the pattern that you were making, a little slot to say what needles you were using, a date and notes. And the whole idea of these, they're what I call bag tags. So I am one of those knitters that likes to move around projects a little bit. So sometimes I need to put something away for a little bit. It needs to go on hold for one reason or another. And I might have a little mountain of bags. And what frustrates me is that when I want to go and see which project I want to pick up again, I have to open every bag. And quite often I have to sort of scrabble through for the pattern and work out what I was doing. My idea is that I can take one of these cards, fill it out, and attach, I've given you a few little safety pins, attach wee safety pins to it, and then attach it to the outside of your project bag. So that when you're looking to see what's there, all you have to do is flip the tag over and read it. You don't have to open it, you don't have to scrabble around for a pattern. You should have a reasonable idea of what's there just by looking at the tag. So that's what these are, bag tags, to organise your life if you are a knitter like me who has a number of things on the go. That might not be the way you work. If you are a monogamous knitter, these might be better off being gifted to a mate, but you might find some other way to use them too. So that's what those are. Also in the box, let's go for the fudge. So every box gets fudge, different flavours each time. This club theme has the salted caramel Finn's fudge in it. Also in the box is a sachet of soak wash. This one is the wild mint flavour. This is a great way of trying this flavour. I haven't actually had this scent in stock till now, so it's a great way of knowing whether or not it's something you like and whether you would like a larger bottle of it in future. But these are great for taking away with you, you know, when you're on holiday, or, you know, gifting to someone. When you gift them an item, you can gift them one of these as well as something they can wash with it. They're no rinse, they're great. So again, every theme gets a different flavour of these, so you'll see them in the upcoming boxes, but it's a nice little addition to your collection. There's also a little envelope with stitch markers in it. These ones are sized specifically for finer needles. So this box contains sock yarn, and socks are usually knit on quite fine needles, often, you know, like 2.25mm. And even when you knit 4mm as a garment, you're still usually using quite small needles, definitely under 4mm. And sometimes the larger stitch markers are just too much. They rattle around on the needle too much. They can create a bit of tension, looseness, where you have to cross your yarn over them. So this little packet contains some markers designed for finer needles. Now the bulk of them are silver in colour, and then there's a few gold ones, and so that's so that you can, for example, use the silver ones to separate your pattern repeats, and then the gold ones to mark when you're going to do your increases or the beginning of round or something, just so you've got a couple of styles. So those are a nice little addition to your collection of stitch markers, and yeah, as I say, ideal for when you're working on those finer needles. They're snagless, they're not fancy, they just work, they're just nice simple things. Your box came with a little card with a little bit of history about Anna Blackburne, tiny amount. It's very hard for me to condense what I wanted you to know down into this one little paragraph, so I'll tell you more about her very shortly, but that was just a little taster. Every box for every theme gets the 2023 Vintage Pearls cat bookmark. Now, I had these printed before we lost our Grace, so she's on it. She'd be on it regardless, because clearly she's been in our lives for 20 years, and this year she was in our life for most of the year, so she's on. This will be the last one that she's on. We miss her, but that's the 23 cats. 4 babies down to 3 now, but so that's in every box from now on, so I won't mention it again. And also there's a little unwind bookmark / advert in every box as well, just to remind you that Unwind Retreat is back on March 2024 here in Dunedin. So that's what's in the box. What is Anna Blackburne's Natural History Cabinet? So Anna Blackburne is someone we actually don't know that much about. We're learning about her now. She's coming to attention fairly recently in terms of historical studies. So she was born around 1726. We don't even know exactly when she was born. Those things are quite difficult to locate sometimes. 18th century records aren't ideal, but also women often aren't recorded in the same way that men are in history, because they don't own land, for example. They're not on leases or bills of sale. They're not in legal documents. So we think Anna was born around 1826. We think she was one of about 9 children. She was probably the 4th or 5th child, so she's about the middle of 9 kids. When she was about 14, her mum died, and not that long after, the rest of her siblings had either left home or had died. So it left her and her dad alone at home, and she effectively became mistress of the manor. Now, her family was wealthy. They had been landowners for a couple of generations. They had merchant ships. They weren't nobility. They didn't have titles, but they were certainly wealthy. They were very comfortable. They did not want for money in life, which meant that Anna had a privilege most women didn't. She really got to live the life that she wanted. We don't know what Anna's formal education was. There's no records to tell us, but her father was a very keen botanist. He cultivated an extraordinary garden. He had lots of specimens from throughout the world. He had heated glass houses. He grew exotic specimens, and he was very passionate about botany. So even if she didn't have a lot of extensive sort of formal education, though her family could have afforded it, she certainly was surrounded by a family culture of wishing to understand the natural world and acquiring samples of the natural world and understanding those things and exploring them. So it's not terribly surprising that, given her financial resources and the world in which she was raised in, Anna decided that she really wanted to pour her passion into a collection of specimens of the natural world. And so Anna Blackburne's Natural History Cabinet is her curated collection of specimens. So birds and beetles, butterflies, plants, shells, pretty much anything connected with the natural world. It was a different time. We don't collect in that way now, obviously, but for her time it was very normal, and her collection was noted, known by leading naturalists of the day. She had correspondence with leading naturalists of the day. Her intelligence and knowledge was respected. She was significant in her area of interest in her time. When her dad died, obviously Anna didn't inherit, because women generally didn't in the time, and she had a house built for her. She calls it a house. I would not call it a house, I would call it a manor. It was a substantial property. She had this place called Fairfield built, and she had a room, and again I wouldn't call it a room, but she had a room built for her collection. Said room spanned the entire length of the building. It sounds like it was most of one whole floor of this large building. So she had a substantial location for her substantial collection. She had also planned to develop the gardens a little bit like her father had, with specimens, and for it to sort of be a tour of world plants and develop an understanding and people who pass through it of the botanic world. But sadly she didn't really keep very good health in her later years, so that never happened. Anna's collection stayed with her till she died. She had never married. There was no reason for her to marry. She was financially stable, and clearly she never met anyone during her life that she wished to engage in that kind of relationship with. So upon her death, her estate went to her nephew. And then we don't really know what happened to her collection, sadly. Her nephew certainly kept some of it, but eventually that arm of the family died out. Properties were sold, and obviously along the way Anna's collection was dispersed, probably into other collections, maybe into museums, but it's very difficult, probably impossible, to identify where items from her collection have gone. What we do have remaining are some images of her collection. Anna commissioned James Bolton, who was an artist and also naturalist, to do a series of works illustrating portions of her collection. They are now housed in the Yale Centre for British Art, and so that's where these images come from. Now, I love this kind of art anyway. I love a sort of good botanical naturalist drawing or painting, so that's kind of what drew me to it. But then I was really drawn to Anna's story because we really don't know that much, because women's history isn't recorded in quite the same way that men's is for a lot of time. I think she's a figure that we will learn more about over time. There is correspondence of hers remaining, there are snippets of her life, and I hope that we will discover more in future. So that's why I chose Anna, and that's her story. Now let's have a look about what you can do with the yarn that you have. So you have 2 skeins of Tramp biodegradable sock, which is a good meterage. We're talking 420 metres in each skein, so you've got 840 metres total yarn, which is quite an amount. Now you can just use them individually. Pair of socks, pair of socks. If that's what you want to do, yeah, by all means, that's a good usage for them. But I thought it might be fun to use them together in some way. Now you can use them together in socks. Now I have a lot of sock patterns, and I won't insult your intelligence by sort of listing off all of them. There's a few behind me, there's a lot more online. I will have links to every pattern that I mentioned down in the description, so you'll be able to find them all. But a couple of my sock patterns that I thought would work really well with this, given the theme and the colours, and I deliberately dyed strongly contrasting colours because I thought they would be really nice used together, is my nightingale sock, which is birds and flowers, works with the theme, or my Florealia socks, again, flowers, works with the theme. They're both stranded colour work, and I know that's not for everyone. So if you would like a pair of socks which utilises both colours but isn't stranded, so a much simpler knit, then Tempera Socks by Audrey Busek, I hope I've said her surname correctly, is something that caught my eye when I was looking for patterns that might be suitable for this. Basically just stripes, but with some nice texture, lace and whatnot, which would work with both of these. You'll get 2 pairs out of the 2 skeins, and probably have something left over. But maybe you're not in for socks. These would be wonderful as shawls, accessories. So one idea for using both skeins of yarn is my Femina pattern, which is a little shawl. It's not a big shawl, it's a little shawl, works really nicely under a winter coat. Has a little bit of lace along the edge, but the bulk of it is just garter stitch, but it utilises 2 colours. Again, I thought it would be really effective in these 2 shades. So that's one suggestion. Similarly, Daisy Daisy by A Handful of Colour is not as not as fussy a lace as maybe Femina is. It's still kind of lacy, but it's much more structural and bold. Again, striped in colour, so you're not doing anything complex, but then with a really interesting daisy stitch in it. The bulk of it outside of that is garter stitch, so again, still quite straightforward. I thought that would be quite effective in this little duo. If you do like stranded colour work and you wanted to do these two together in something other than socks, then the Arc Deco Cowl by Natalie Servant caught my eye. It's these wonderful curvy deco lines in a cowl. It is colour work, but it is knit as a tube, which is a great way to knit a cowl. So it's double thickness, it would be super warm. She does knit her model in a sock yarn, so it is kind of suitable for these kinds of yarns. I think these two colours would look really amazing. This is kind of a deco-y colour scheme. What if you want to do a little bit of stranded colour work, nothing too complex, and you want more than just one accessory, because this will definitely do more than one accessories. I found this really cute little collection. The colour work is subtle, not too complex. It's just two colours, which is nice. And the pattern has a cowl, some mitts, some socks and hat. I don't know that you'd get all four out of these two skeins, but you'd probably get two and maybe even three. So these are the, and I'm going to brutalise this name because my pronunciation will be terrible, Midnachos collection by Pernilla Einarsson. It's really a cute, nice, I just love that she's done 4 accessories in the same design. Great for a little wee set. I thought that would be really cute. What if you want a fairly traditional triangle type shawl? They're lovely and easy to knit. Sierra Trail by Rosemary Hill sort of caught my eye. So it's plain knitting with then lace blocks in between, and the lace is in a different colour. So you could have this as your main colour and then your lacy sections in this, or vice versa. A little bit of lace to keep things interesting, but not so much that you feel overwhelmed as a whole lace project. And if you're not really a lacy person, but you like a bit of texture and you like the idea of 2 colours in a shawl, and maybe you want a longer shawl shape because they act more like a scarf, then the Silver River shawl by Helen Stewart caught my eye. The model is almost exactly these colours. It's got a little bit of texture. It's just, I thought it was really interesting. Yeah, it just, nothing, it's one of those nice understated designs in many respects. Clean, looks great. So those are some pattern options, but what if you want to add some more colour to these two to do something bigger? I've got plenty of options for you. So these 2 colours, I thought if you wanted to sort of stick with the blue, like if you kind of maybe say I want to emphasise the blue side of things, or I want to emphasise the sort of pinky side of things. If you want to emphasise the blue side of things, then I thought Lock would be a nice addition to these 2. Brightens things up a wee bit. If you want to emphasise the pinkier tones, then I thought Archimedes would be quite fun with them. It's a red, but this is such a pale pink that it kind of takes on whatever you put with it in many respects. So yeah, I liked the red with it. If you want to stick with neutrals, then you can always stick in a black. This is a coney, which is just a sort of traditional, it's a charcoal, but it's a black, so very neutral. That's a very classic, you know, you've got light, dark, mid, blue, pale, black. And I love greens with pink, so I think there are 2 options. If the more sedate option is Glen Park, which is kind of a really dark olivey green, and I don't know how it appears on camera. It might be a wee bit darker than it is in real life. See if I can get the light bouncing off it. So I liked that, but the true winner for me personally, and I recommend this colour with almost everything, so sorry, is this. So this is Rosgill, and it's a olivey, slightly limey olivey colour, and I just think it looks fantastic with pinks. It works with the blue. It really sort of livens things up. So that's my 5th suggestion. So I think these colours are quite versatile. So you could team them with another colour from my collection, but you could also look in your stash. They would look great with a multicolour that maybe had these colours and then one of the ones that I've suggested in it would look great. So yeah, you could look for something that had a little bit of pinks and blues and then maybe a little bit of limey greens or a little bit of turquoise. Something like that would be lovely. And yeah, knit a big shawl. You can almost knit a cardigan with 3 depending on your size, obviously, but yeah, the meterage is good. The meterage is good. Right, so that was the Natural History Cabinet of Anna Blackburne. Okay, let's move on to the Tannahill themes. There were 2 boxes of Tannahill this year, different themes. And the patterns that I suggest for each of these work for both Tannahill themes. So kind of treat the pattern suggestions in the next 2 themes as one big pool. I will present them separately, but by no means does one not work for the other and vice versa. So let's look firstly at Paul Klee. So box of bits and pieces. Inside the box, probably the first thing you'll notice is there are 4 skeins of Tannahill. These are 50 gram skeins, so you've got 200 grams of yarn in total. And they come in blues and greens and this dark burgundy and this very pale pink. The colours come from principally from so what I deemed the primary image, which is on screen, of Paul Klee's work, one of his works from 1914. But there in the box there are 2 little stacks of cards that have Klee's work on the front. These are little cards you can add to a gift. So they say, I made this for you, it took ages, please treat it with care, hand wash in cool water or machine wash on a delicate cycle, do not tumble dry, lay flat to dry. So these are ideal cards to pop on any gift you may give someone in this yarn or any pure wool non-machine washable yarn. So there's a couple of little options. They're on lovely 400 gram cards, so they're nice and rigid. And I just use little rubber bands to hold them together because rubber bands are biodegradable. So you've got those. You've got a sachet of Pineapple Grove scented soap wash, bright yellow. You've got a bar of the Russian thin smudge. You have the little card that tells you a tiny snippet about Paul Klee. And again, you have a little packet of stitch markers. Every box does have a packet of stitch markers, but they're all different. So this time round, there are a selection of sizes. So they're all in this lovely kind of copper colour. You possibly can't see them very well. They're copper colour, so you have 3 different sizes of simple ring. So large ones that are suitable for your largest needles, mid, and then sort of a smaller range. They are still bigger than the little stitch markers I gave you for the sock yarns, but there's a nice selection of sizes there. And then you've got some of the safety pin style markers for when you need a detachable marker. So there's a little packet of those to add to your collection. And Klee is, Klee's life we know a lot about, and so I'm not going to give you a full biography because we'd be here for hours. Klee's work is really fascinating to me. Klee himself is a really quite an interesting man in the history of men in art history, dare I say. I studied art history at university. I have a postgraduate diploma in it even, and what that taught me is that in Western art history, a lot of the men that are revered are actually not very nice people. Paul Klee is one of the few people who, I didn't know him personally, and he might have been terrible, but there isn't a lot of evidence remaining that suggests he was anything but a perfectly normal and probably fairly reasonable individual, which is nice. It's nice. And his work is beautiful, and his work changes a lot through his career. He's not the kind of person who did the same thing over and over. And his development and growth into the style that we probably associate with him more is quite interesting as well. So he was Swiss born, although he did spend a good proportion of his life in Germany. So some people may think of him as a German artist. Swiss born. His parents were both musicians, and I think their wish was that he would be a musician as well, and he certainly received a lot of musical training and was a very, very competent violinist. But in his teenage years decided to rebel against his parents, as teenagers are wont to do, and he studied art instead. And initially, a lot of his work was black and white. He really struggled with colour. I think he sort of really struggled full stop in many ways with his art. I think he didn't feel very confident. It took him a while to find his feet. In about 1900s, about maybe 1901, I can't quite remember, early 1900s, he married a woman, Lily Stumpf, who was a pianist. And she was the primary support for the household. So she gave the odd concert and she did a lot of piano teaching. So Paul, they had one child, and so Paul was the sort of primary domestic person in those early years. He did practice his art, but he wasn't selling a lot. It wasn't something he was making a living from. He kept house and worked on his art, but Lily was the primary wage earner for the household. In 1914, Klee took a trip to Tunisia, and that changed his world, really. For some reason, this trip it was like a road to Damascus moment for him. He saw colour for the first time in many respects. He really felt what he saw impressed him so much, and just sparked something in him to go and embrace colour and abstraction. Colour he was never confident with. Colour he felt he didn't understand, that he could not embrace in his artwork to this point. This trip changed everything for him. In 1914, his artwork changes just like that. Colour is everything. In fact, there's a little quote on your card that says, "Colour and I are one, I am a painter." That's a portion of a longer quote from his time. Well, it's a longer quote from in response to his time in Tunisia, which is, "Colour has taken possession of me. No longer do I have to chase after it. I know that it has a hold on me forever. Colour and I am one. I am a painter." It really was just this extraordinary pivotal moment in his art. And the key image that I have used comes from 1914, because for me, this is when Klee's work starts to get really interesting. And it is the point at which his career as an artist really changes. Problem with 1914, Germany, is that World War I is just about to outbreak. So Klee isn't conscripted till 1916, so he manages to stay out of the war to that point, which isn't to say that the war isn't affecting him, because there is a war in his country. But 1916, he is forced to join actively. He is conscripted. Initially, he begins at the front line, but before too long, he gets to move to aircraft maintenance, and then he moves to the Royal Bavarian Flying School, where he does administration, and he's allowed to live outside of the barracks, and he has a room that he can paint, and so he gets to continue his artwork through that war. By the end of that second decade of the 1900s, so by about 1919, he is now a working artist. He's making money. He's internationally known by about 1919. It's all go for him from that point onwards. In the 1920s, he joins the Bauhaus. And this is where his true legacy comes in, because he teaches painting. He lectures and he writes. And he writes about these theories of colour that he has developed since his pivotal moment in Tunisia. And he's really incredibly influential to a lot of artists of this period. The theories that he presents, the ways he instructs painters around painting are really, really influential. So that was through the 20s. He teaches at the Bauhaus. Come 1931, he joins the Dusseldorf Academy. But in 1933, the Nazis force him out of that position and he leaves Germany entirely. It's not safe for him to be there, obviously, and he returns to Switzerland. His work was one of many included in the Nazi Party's Degenerate Arts exhibition in 1937, where they showed you all the ways you should not do art. So yeah, he was out of it, safe in Switzerland. By the mid-1930s, Klee had developed scleroderma, which is a rare but really debilitating disease. He was still incredibly productive. He produced something like 8,000 works in his lifetime. He really, really was. His output was extraordinary. But the scleroderma ends his life in 1940. But what a legacy he left, really. I really enjoy Klee's work, and I think I would like to do some more dyeing in response to his work in future. So don't be surprised if we revisit Mr. Klee at some point. Now, that's knowing a little bit about the man. What about what we do with these colours? Now, when I dye these Tannahill, and I've dyed Superstar in the past, when I dye these 50-gram blocks of 4, one of the things I keep in mind is that they would be lovely for doing a yoke on a garment. You can add a colour to them to extend them to make something else, but also they work just as they are for a little accessory or something. So some ideas for accessories. In my patterns, I think there's a number to choose from. You can do lovely little hats like decennium or quindecennium, those colourwork hats where you can, if you like to sort of colour your own, because these look wildly different depending on what colours you knit them in. So same pattern, different colours. You can knit them in as 2 colours, 3, 4, 5, 10, whatever you like. So great for little colourwork projects. If you've got a little stash of other colours, this mixes really, really well with the Jamieson's 4-ply Spindrift yarn. It's a similar structure. They're both woolen spun yarns, similar thickness. So if you have a little hoard of little bits of yarn, these mix right in that for doing things like that. So those are one option. Nice little colourwork hat. There are many out there. If you want a specific 4-colour pattern, this is my Edgedeer cowl. It's 4 colours. 2 of the colours are very similar. In fact, the whole range is slightly similar. This is just a little bit brighter in these tones in particular, and a little bit paler in the pink. So something like this is fun. This is a great first stranded colourwork project because it's just round and round and round. There's no steeks, there's no corners to turn, no increases or decreases, and it produces a really, really warm cowl for winter. So those are those options for little accessories. If you want to do a colourwork yoke on a sweater, then I went through and found a couple of options which are quite, they were quite recent additions to Ravelry, so I thought you might not have seen them, and they caught my eye. So one of them is Klee by Kirsten Michelle. This has got quite a bold colourwork banded yoke on it, and I thought it could look quite cute in these colours, teamed with another colour for the body, and I'll show you sort of some of the suggestions I think that would work for that in a second. Similarly, but not quite as bold a colourwork design, is Mabel by Samantha Guerin. This is a sort of finer pattern, so if you like a less graphic design, this might be a good option for you. They are principally similar styles of jumper. They are both top-down, stranded, yoked, shaped things. They both have reasonable size ranges, which is nice. They should be size inclusive, including the ease in them. So if you wanted to do one of those options or any other yoke on a sweater, then what colour can you team with these as the body colour? So personally, if it was me, I might go for something like Jocksthorn, which is a really dark navy, because I quite like a dark base, but that's up to you. If you'd like a light base, obviously the natural Tannahill shade, Madara, goes with everything and it really lightens it up. So it's like, do you want a dark and moody look, or do you want a lighter, brighter look? So this is the lightest option. And then obviously Jocksthorn is one of the darker options. darker option, but in green instead of blue, is gold. And I really like greens and pinks, as I said earlier. So this is a nice combo here. And then you've got the turquoisey blue as the pop, which is lovely. If you want to keep it light, but not quite as light as Nadara, then you can choose pale grey. So this is Home Park, which is nice and neutral. It's a slightly steely, cooler grey. So these colours are kind of cooler. It works quite well with that. And you could go for a more mid-range tone. You could throw in a blue. So this is Palaship Bay. Not my personal favourite, but there are lots of options there. So you can definitely, go light or dark with it really easily. It's just picking out what works for you and what suits you, really. So that's the options for adding in a main colour. And then I have one more little pattern for you. I don't know why it's last on my list and not with the other accessories, but so be it. If you wanted to do a mitten, we don't do mittens much because it doesn't often get that cold in New Zealand, but actually mittens are a really satisfying little knit. Hibernus Mittens by Tracy Scott are just a really cute little mitten pattern. And for some reason in these colours, they just, I don't know, they just sort of seemed right to me. And again with the theme, they're not abstract, but they are just like little blobs of colour, which kind of works quite well with clay somehow. I don't know. In my mind it does. So that's one more smaller but quite complex little pattern, because there's obviously lots of shaping and stuff in them, but another way to use that selection. So that is the Paul Klee Tannahill range. We will move on and look at the Jessie Wilcox Smith range. So one last box. Inside, the yarn are these lovely warm and neutral tones. We will come back to what we can do with this. We have 2 little bundles of note cards with a couple of Jessie's Water Babies illustrations on them. So these are just great little quick note cards. I like to use these sorts of things for when I send packages to someone and I just want to add a little note, those sorts of things. I don't write a lot of full letters, but I quite like a little, just a little card that could be used for lots of different reasons. So those are those. You've got the half Russian, half chocolate bar of Fin's Fudge. There was, of course, the little card with a few details about Jessie. I'll tell you some more soon. There is a Uzu flavoured sachet of soak. There is the same bookmark and unlined card that's in every pack, and then the stitch markers in this theme are all a sort of brass toned markers. There are little safety pin style, pear-shaped safety pin style markers, and some little round markers, and then a few silver markers as the different kind for marking your increases or your beginning of round or whatever it is that you need. So just a nice little collection. Again, quite suitable for smaller needles, this selection, which is what you generally tend to use when you're knitting 4-ply. Okay, so let's learn a little bit about Jessie Wilcox Smith. The card had a few cursory notes on it. A lot of you will probably be familiar with the Water Babies and her works illustrating that. Some of her most famous works, but she was extraordinarily successful in her time. So she was American. She was born in Philadelphia to a fairly middle to upper class family by the sounds of things. She received private schooling, certainly her younger years of schooling were at a private institution, and then she was sent away for further education when she was a little bit older in her teens. So, you know, she had some great advantages growing up, which is nice. She actually trained to be a school teacher, and she did teach for a short period of time. She taught what Americans call kindergartners, but I'm assuming as more new entrant age kids, so sort of 5 or 6 years old. I don't think she had any problem with children, but she found the job very physically demanding. It sounds like she had some back issues, and just interacting with small children physically was something that she struggled with. So it really wasn't sort of a career for her, and somebody suggested that she come along to some art classes. So she gave that a go and discovered that she had a talent for it. So she trained in art, and then straight out of her initial training, she got work in the advertising department of the Ladies' Home Journal, where she created art for advertisements in the magazine. And she continued her studies. So she studied at the Drexel Institute, as it was then. I think it's Drexel University now. And when she was there, she met Elizabeth Shippen Green and Violet Oakley, two women who she worked with, she shared a studio with, and ended up having lifelong friendships with. They ended up living together. So those two women and Jessie and another woman called Henrietta Cousins all lived in the Red Rose Inn, along with a few family members from one of the women. And they became known, these three artists in particular became known as the Red Rose Girls, because they worked together, they lived together, they shared a lot of their lives together. And those relationships never died. They were, throughout their entire lives, they were very close. They lived in the inn initially, and then when they had to leave the inn, they moved to a farmhouse elsewhere in Pennsylvania, and they called it Cogsley, which is like a conglomeration of all the first letters of all their surnames. And then after Cogsley, which sort of naturally broke up in later years when people moved into other things, they all sort of stayed in the area. And Jessie had a house built very close to Cogsley, she called Cogs Hill, and she lived there with Henrietta and until her death. Smith was extraordinarily successful for her time. She was extraordinarily successful as an illustrator, full stop. For a working woman in this time, we're talking, she was born in 1863, she dies in 1935, so we're really talking about the very late 19th, early 20th century when she's at the peak of things. For a woman in that era, she did incredibly well. She made very good money, she was incredibly financially independent. She got to live life on her terms, doing what she wanted, and it sounds like the Rose Red Girls in particular had a ball. They had a great time living together and working together, and generally it was a really idyllic lifestyle by the sounds of things. She illustrated the Water Babies in 1915, and it's probably now some of the stuff that she's most remembered for, but she did advertisements for huge brands at the time like Kodak and Pears. She had, I think I mentioned on your wee card that she produced covers for Good Housekeeping for years, for absolute years. She was really at the top of the illustrating game. She did really, really well for herself. There is no evidence, they certainly didn't self-identify, but that Jessie lived with Henrietta for so many years suggests that they might have been partners. There's no evidence to say that, but I mean, all of these women were in a position to live life as they chose to, some of that is just financial success, that they didn't have to marry for money or any such things, but it may well be that Henrietta was Jessie's partner. And Henrietta did seem to inherit some of her works, or the majority of her works, after her death. All of those women kind of bucked social convention for the time, which is nice, and they got to live life on their own terms, doing what they enjoyed, so that's always nice. So looking to the yarn again and what we can do with it. Now, remembering that everything we discussed in the Paul Klee collection in terms of patterns works for this group as well, and every pattern that I talk about here will work for the Klee collection. Let's just go through some of those. Again, thinking about this being used as as part of a garment, so you can add yarn to it, and these would be like your colour work colours on a garment where you've added an extra colour. I found this Cutie Crop by Annie Lupton, which is this lovely band of colour work across the torso. Crop sweaters not for everyone, they're very easy to lengthen, but it's something a bit different. I think it would be really, really nice over a dress in winter when you want that extra warmth, but you don't want anything too long, especially if the dress flares out from the waist. It's just something a little bit different in terms of garments, and I thought that was really sweet. But you could certainly do the kind of traditional yoked sweater, and I found Talkeetna, I'm hoping I'm saying that correctly, Talkeetna by Caitlin Hunter, which is a more classic round yoke sweater, and I thought it would look really lovely with these as the colours. So she goes from light to dark and warm colours, so it's almost that they're very similar colours to this. If you look at the model, they're very similar shades in the colour work to these colours, so that really struck me as being an option for these. So that's a fairly standard shaped round neck, round yoke sweater. If you prefer something that's a bit boxier, which lots of people do, then, and I'm probably going to get this name wrong as well, Trawalua by Tanya Barley is this drop sleeve, quite boxy sweater, designed to be quite oversized. It has colour work on the body and also on the sleeves. Personally, I'm a little bit hesitant about colour work on sleeves because it takes a bit of a time, but it does look really effective, and it's another stylistic option in terms of a garment that has some colour work and then a main colour to go with it. But if you're not into a whole sweater's worth of colour work, then I thought the Silvana hat by Kirsten Michelle was really cute, and again would sort of suit these quite earthy colours. Obviously the other hats we talked about would work as well, but that one really struck me as being really sweet. And then I found this, it's very cute, and cute might not be your thing, but it's very cute, and I think it would suit these colours lovely, is the Shepherdess Mitts by Nina Pomorenke, which are these great sheep themed mitts, and I just thought that these quite earthy warm tones would work quite well for those. Yeah, they just took my fancy, a bit of fancy, but they took my fancy. So in terms of what can we mix with these colours if we wanted to make a garment, and what could we use as the main colour? Now we've got neutrals and warm tones, and if you like warm tones, if that's sort of a colour palette that really appeals to you, you could stick with those. So you could certainly add in this red is Kyledale, so you could add in that dark red as an option, or the gold that is Caramel Wood also works quite well. I think it looks fantastic. I think everything looks fantastic with a green, but I think this looks quite fantastic with a green. So you've got a couple of options. So this is Little Moss Side. So I think that collection's quite lovely. And that is a yellow-based green, so it works quite well with these tones. But Gold is the dark green, which would really give a depth if you wanted a more overall dark colour, and then these tones with it. I thought that also looks superb. Sticking to the dark theme, and these are also colours I suggested for the Paul Klee, obviously. I don't think you can go wrong with navy, and I love this tone with navy. These golds and the rust with the navy I think look fantastic. So that, for me, my two favourites in terms of mains are either this green or that blue. But obviously that's just my personal taste. And also I thought you could go, if you wanted something lighter, you could go in for a blue with these colours, because again, blue and rust always looks fantastic together. And that sort of slightly denim-y blue is a colour that suits a lot of people. So those are options to add with it. This colour may look like the natural shade to you. It is actually dyed. The natural shade is a bit lighter. So this is, I've made this more grey because that's the colour I was aiming for. So you could use the natural, but there isn't a high contrast between these two. which is fine because it depends where you position it in your colour work as to whether that's an issue or not. So a good range of choices. You can, of course, if for some reason you felt particularly generous to yourself and managed to get both of the Tannahill sets, I think they would go beautifully together as well. Blend them all into one big happy family. So hopefully you've got some ideas now of what you can do with everything, or your particular club anyway. As I said before, all of the links to all of the patterns I have mentioned are down in the description, so you don't have to have remembered anything, you don't have to rewind and think, what was that? I've tried to pick patterns that I thought were interesting, that when they're garments they are size inclusive, so hopefully that they are options that can work for you. And yeah, I had fun putting them together. I hope you had fun opening them. And thank you for participating if you bought one. Thank you for watching if you are just here to see what was in them. I hope you have a happy and healthy remaining holidays if you're on holiday, and I will see you all next year. Cheers.